Hello, this is Dr. Heather Lee, and this is a continuation of a discussion about response to intervention. In the last video, we talked about RTI and the three-tiered model that's often used in schools, and that model is often more of an elementary model. And we're going to talk more specifically about how RTI presents itself in the high school level. And one of the most common ways that high schools work with response to intervention is through a problem-solving model. And I want you to listen real carefully to this model, because this is just a good way for teachers in general to address problems, whatever problems come up, in more than just a haphazard way, or let's see if I can figure this out. But this gives you a structure to follow. The first step of this problem-solving model is to define the problem and measure the current status. In other words, the teacher thinks about exactly what is the problem, what is the issue, where is this student exactly struggling, not just they're failing. Is it that they're not turning in their homework? Is it that they're not paying attention in class? And then the teacher would measure it. So not just, quote unquote, this student never turns in their homework, but instead, out of the last 4 assignments, the student has turned in only 1. That's measuring their status. Finding out exact details. So then, after the problem has been specifically defined and you know its status by measuring it, then you develop goals and a plan. And this is when the teacher really sits down, and a student could be involved with this at this point. But the teacher talks about where she needs the student to be, what are the goals, and how are we going to work our way towards that goal. Not just, you need to start turning in your homework. But this is where you really get into why a student isn't turning it in. What are some goals? Are they staying up too late? You know, what is going to be a goal to work on that? Is it that their home life is pretty difficult and they're not able to do work at home? What kind of goals, and how are we going to set up a plan to work with that? So you get a very specific plan. Then the third step is to implement with fidelity. And fidelity means faithfulness and honesty. Because here's what happens a lot. We teachers are very, very busy, and sometimes it's difficult to follow through on what we say we want to do. So we may define a problem, and then we establish goals, but then when it comes to putting the plan in action, things fall apart. We're not helping the student to be accountable. We don't check on it every day like we said we would. And so part of this plan recognizes that if it's going to work, it has to be implemented with fidelity, with faithfulness to do what you said you were going to do. Otherwise, you really won't know what's not working. Is it the student that's not working, or is it that we just weren't consistent about it? So then after the plan has been implemented for a certain amount of time, that would be part of your plan, how long you would implement it, then you would assess the progress and evaluate the results. So there would be a specific point in time where you sit down and say, okay, how is this working? Of the last 4 homework assignments, how many has the student turned in this time? And we assess, are we making progress? Is the student getting better? Are the grades improving? And then you would continue to go around this model. If the student is improving, then you may have solved the problem, and the RTI for that student would be successful and completed. But it could be that there's still not progress. Then you go back to the drawing board in a way, and you define, again, make sure you have the right problem and a current status again. You develop different goals or the same goals with a different plan, and you implement that, and then you evaluate that. And you may go around this model several times, but do you see how it gives real meat to a process for how you might solve any kind of problem. These could be a problem that a teacher has in a classroom, a problem that a whole school has, a problem that a whole system has. This is just an orderly way to solve problems that can help support response to intervention. Now, you're going to be reading about an example of a 9th grade classroom and disruptive behavior that the teacher continued to have, and it was a real problem in her classroom. And then you're going to be participating in a discussion board about that example. So, in order to make response to intervention work, there are some things that it's very important that a teacher has, teacher competencies. First, in a teacher's attitude and beliefs, it is really important that a teacher believes that everybody can learn. If you have a more throw up your hands mentality and this student has never learned for anybody else, won't be able to figure it out, then they're not going to learn. They know that your expectations are low for them or that you're giving up on them. And at the same time, you also need to believe not only can they do it, but that you can do it. And even if you're a new teacher, even if this is a problem that feels too big for you, you need to recognize, I can do this. And as believers, as Christian teachers, in whatever kind of school situation you are in, we need to recognize that the Holy Spirit is our guide and that God will really give us wisdom if we ask for it, to help us understand our students. But that doesn't mean that He doesn't want us to do the hard work of problem solving and going through the systems that our schools have put in place in order to help students. So your attitude and belief as a teacher is critical. Another thing that's very important is the instructional competencies. In other words, the skills that a teacher has. Some of them need to be domain specific. In other words, if you're a history teacher, you understand how history works and you understand how to teach history well. And your understanding of that really helps you to be a better teacher in general, not just a history teacher. And along those lines, a teacher also needs to know how to match a strategy with a student's needs. And that means that you as a teacher need to have a lot of strategies kind of in your tool belt that you have done or you've read about, or you're continuing to learn and watch from other teachers. You learn different strategies that might work with different types of students. And then when you get a student who, for example, doesn't turn in homework, you have several strategies you can try, and you try to match it up with your student. You study your student and you determine what strategy to use based on what you think would work best for that student. Teachers also need to be organized in their classrooms and have excellent behavior management in order to make this work. Problem-solving skills, and also the ability to work with other colleagues, to put things in practice, to monitor and to assess. This is best done in a group setting, because in the high school level, you're not going to have the student all day like they would in an elementary classroom. But instead, you are one of several teachers that a student has. So you'll be meeting together in teams and implementing plans, most likely with the help of other teachers. So you need to be a person who is willing to compromise, is willing to work with other teachers for the best of your students. And as a Christian teacher, I think that our perspective should be different than what you might hear sometimes from other teachers. First of all, I hope that you have a perspective that it is your responsibility to defend the rights of your students, to do everything you can for them, and whatever difficult situation they may come from. Remember that student, even the most challenging student, was made by God, is His child, and has value. Even if nobody can find it, that student has value somewhere. And make it your job, make it your goal to find those strengths and to support that student, and not to be a teacher who gives up on a student. Think about how Christ sees that student and how you should see that student as well. We talked about recognizing their gifts, developing their strengths, and then truly giving yourself for them, being a servant to these students who are in most need of help and most need of intervention. And I believe when we have that perspective, that God will make us successful. Not that every student and every situation will be solved, but I believe that God will give us wisdom and will help us to make a real difference in the lives of these students. Thank you very much, and have a great day.